So today what I want to talk to you about is the current status of negotiations, a little bit more in depth about that environment. We'll talk about some of those important issues that have driven the environment to include the company's historic restructure of FedEx Express and the corporation. We'll talk briefly about the system bid. We'll talk a little bit about the revenue focus that FedEx is undertaken. We'll review some of these open items, and then lastly, we're going to talk about something that's gotten very popular in social media, which has been scope, and we're going to talk about that against the backdrop of declining volumes. So when I say we're in a challenging environment, we didn't get here overnight. It's been a long process. We are approaching the 24th month of negotiation, and it started well before the current sitting MEC that's here before you today, and many chairmen before. In fact, our work from our team started in 2016. The 2016 work that developed and focused a strategy to bring finally a fix in the pension plan for all of our pilots to address that issue head on. And I can tell you today that we're proud of that success that we've accomplished. It was the right thing to do. It's still the right thing to do, but it's not done yet. But the phases of negotiation are laid out. These phases don't change. So if there's a reset anywhere along the way, or if pilots are considering or think it's a good idea to reset or to just say no to the first contract because they assume FedEx will show up with a brighter, newer, larger package of benefits and pay for you, that's not reality. The effort that's gone underway here and your dues dollars have supported this process, and it's taken significant pilots' dues dollars to get us where we are today. Your commitment to that strategy and your willingness to support us along the way, whether it be through individual surveys that you've completed, going online to do a survey, the DART reports you send in, the communications you send to your reps, the grievances that we have, the cases that we've had, the settlements, all of these things were built up during the preparation phase. And it's been a long road. And it has success. And the success is within our reach here. Now, the company has certainly thrown a lot of blocking avenues in front of us, but we've maintained our commitment to your goals. And that's why we're here today, right? If we had capitulated, if we had relinquished on those goals, if the MEC said, you know what, let's lower the bar, we can't get there, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about this strike vote today. We wouldn't be sitting here discussing these issues. So it's because we've held the line at the negotiating table and around the MEC table, it's why we're here today. I don't think any pilot has relinquished any of their goals and what they believed was a ratifiable contract. And so where we sit today is this end game, and the end game has significant economic impact for our pilots. It has come at a significant cost to this association to get us where we are today. At any given point, the end game could wrap up. If the company shows up at the table and they say, we're ready to get the deal done, that's when we move from the economic and control items right to the final stages of endgame negotiations. We try the best we can to preserve what we have for goodwill at the table to preserve endgame negotiations. Are there pieces of the puzzle that we can pull in at the end that, while they weren't specifically opened in negotiations, are important to the end deal, that might fix some problems for us, that might address some concerns? This endgame negotiation now has a different flavor. And I can tell you it's largely driven by what the company wants to do with the system bid. So let me speak to you first here when we talk about the status of negotiations. What's important to all of you to understand is that we're still in mediation. The expedited mediation that we entered into in October had a protocol agreement that went along with it. That protocol agreement essentially had a 90-day window to complete expedited mediation. That's expired. Nothing has changed, however, for us at the table. We still receive the same level of emphasis from the mediator and from the National Mediation Board. In fact, after that 90 days, we had a status meeting up for negotiations with the 3 board members of the National Mediation Board. We gave them an update on the status of negotiations, as did the company. We explained to them in detail why it was we were there discussing those issues. We explained to them that the company hasn't been able to react and to move in our direction towards pay, duration, and the amendable period recovery payment. Those 3 items are the final term sheet. The NMB recognized that more work needed to be done. They put us back to work and they gave us more meeting dates with the mediator. So we're still receiving the same level of emphasis and the same attention from the board. That hasn't changed. Expedited mediation helps you get in quicker, it helps you get a mediator quicker, and there's some aggressive scheduling that goes on. None of that has changed. But what I want to point to here is what the NMB's overall responsibility is. Because a lot of people ask questions, well, why don't you just force the release? Why don't you just tell them we're done? Why don't you tell them we're at an impasse? Look, the proposals lay the land. It provides for the mediator the explanation of, is there movement at the table or is there not? Are the parties reaching an impasse? And the mediator is going to constantly try and enter into that discussion to bring the parties closer together. They are the process people in this negotiation. So what does this mean for us? Well, it means that the mediator saw that there was still room to work. So they've scheduled negotiations again for the week of May 1st. So let's talk briefly about the negotiating environment. We had this slide before and we briefed the pilots on this. And the left side of your screen, 2020 to 2022, is the environment we found ourselves in. The company came to the table in negotiations incredibly understaffed. They were dealing with the pandemic operation, the high ops tempo. They were hiring at max output. They couldn't put a single new hire above and beyond what they were doing in the schoolhouse and keep up with our recurrent training. We were still in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic with lockdowns. Our pilots were going through numerous trip revisions, aggravating an already frustrating fact of being on the road in lockdown hotels, undergoing significant testing requirements, getting in and out of countries. And the economic conditions we had seen during this time was the highest inflation in 40 years. New, completely new for some of our newest pilots here. They have never seen inflation rates like that through their lifetime. We also saw FedEx with record profitability, record revenue growth. The industry trends on TAs at the time was, well, we knew that the regionals were starting to push up the pay rates from the bottom because they're trying to secure the loss of flying that they were seeing. And we also saw a freeze to Section 6 negotiations with the large carriers. Delta, United, American, all had to put their Section 6 negotiations essentially on pause to negotiate pandemic LOAs. So now you look at where we are today in the constantly evolving and moving environment. Now the company is misaligned. So they overshot with 2201 and now they're trying to fix it in 2301. Well, fortunately for us, our negotiating team, we didn't react to the company's overzealous proposals that wanted to force mandatory flying on pilots, increased above and beyond what you fly today. They wanted to increase that flying without your decision in that. And because we have an overriding goal that was to protect the pilot's quality of life no matter what we did in negotiations, that would be our focus, we didn't engage on those issues. Had we, it would have been a mistake, clearly. Now we're in the opposite environment compared to the staffing and the flight hours. So ops tempo has now normalized. The belly freight that had evaporated, that caused a significant increase in our revenue, in our flight hours, that has come back. That's not new scope. That's scope that's been in the book since 1999. That belly freight is now being expanded for the use that was originally set up. It didn't exist because the passenger flights on those international flights dried up. They went away. So FedEx was still going to move that freight. So the economic conditions, now you see an aggressive Fed taking action on a bigger global economic scale to prevent a recession or a potential recession. The problem now that we see is that this has also increased the pressure within the industry to produce a deal. And this environment, this environment that has caused concern for the pilots now, today, under this system bid realignment, we have opposing views on what's going to happen with the company. We've spent significant amount of time trying to understand the company's drive and Network 2.0 discussions. We were reading the tea leaves before they made their public announcement on Wall Street. We had a pretty good idea that ground was going to vanish or be incorporated, melded, if you would, into Express. What we didn't know was how much of that was going to occur. We still don't know to this day how much of that transformation will impact Express. FedEx management and the new leadership have decided to make a very aggressive change at the corporate level, and it is going to impact FedEx Express. There is clearly a push to move freight, lower yielding freight, off our airplanes and into trucks where it can work and still meet deadlines and commitments for the ground network. So there are changes yet to be realized here, and we don't know the magnitude of those. So we're proceeding carefully in the endgame negotiations, trying to gauge as best we can what the end stage of the pilot staffing looks like. We have some communications that will be coming out over the next week that will try to provide some color, some background on Section 24, what it was designed to do, how it's being used, and what the staffing numbers look like. I don't think anybody believes that this bid, System 2301, is going to solve all of FedEx Express's staffing problems. It's likely to see more change. This is a realignment bid. It's not a furlough bid, but it also shows no room for pilot hiring, and I think that's realistic. I don't suspect, based off of what we're being told and what we're seeing from the drawdown in the bases, that we're going to see much hiring here. So it's an unsettling time, to say the least. Certainly if you've been hired here since 2015 forward, it's a different Express that exists today than when you were hired. So we understand those concerns. And the concerns are not going to be discarded. The concerns are clear and important. But the MEC, and we haven't had this discussion, we're going to have it this week, the MEC is going to have to decide how we move from here on out. And they're going to base those decisions on what our goals were, what the threats are, what the risk and reward analysis looks like. They have to provide their due diligence into the items that are open today. So what do we have today that needs to be closed out? Well, we've said we've been in negotiations for 24 months. Our work was steady at the beginning and continuous. Could have been at a faster pace, but under the focused negotiation, both parties brought to the table similar open items in terms of the volume of open items. The company opened within each section more individual issues than we opened. That being said, many of the company's openers were never negotiated. They were discarded, like the ones I told you about earlier, when the company wanted to mandate extra flying for all the pilots and reduce your minimum days off, or increase time away from base, or alter to their advantage substitution. Those are the things, just a few of the things that we discarded, that we could not see any real fruit in negotiating improvements for the pilots. It wasn't going to happen. So on the list here, some of these items were opened only by the company, some we both opened. Important on those is Section 28 retirement. So if the discussion is maybe it's time to reset and bring scope off the table, there's a lot of important data points that we need to point to and look at on that discussion. Number one, is it fixable? Number two, will the company engage at all on a scope discussion? And I'll remind you, company opened scope, we didn't, but we still improved. And we had no idea this was where it was going, but we have improvements in scope that deal somewhat with the direction of lower BLGs. That's already improved. That's done. It's TA'd. And if we want to go back in and open any one of these sections, scope, deadheading, hours of service, What message does that send to the NMB, and does it show that we're willing to get the deal done? Does it allow for regressive behavior that's going to come back to us, that we can expect to see come back to us? And the answer is absolutely yes. If we go and pull scope off the table because we want to rewrite language or attempt to rewrite language, I can guarantee you the company will not sit idly by, that they will absolutely want to pull 28 off the table, and they'll pull other sections off the table. We owe it to the full membership to ensure that we don't cause any damage or harm or decrease the value of a substantial improvement that we have. And I understand there's some on the lower half of the seniority or pilots who've been hired here in the past 2 or 3 years that believe that this retirement improvement, Section 28, was a wholesale fix for the most senior pilots of FedEx, that it only benefits the senior pilots. And I can tell you, and I'm sure every one of the MEC members that represent you, that are sitting here today, will tell you that's absolutely false. There is a complete fix, top to bottom, on Section 28 for every single pilot, whether you were hired yesterday or you were hired 30 years ago. That is in our grasp. But it's not done. Even though it's TA'd, that thing can be lost. It can go away. It's not done until this TA is signed and ratified by the FedEx pilots. So that's what's at risk still. So even though we have TA'd, and we may be diverted in some of our attention right now, do not fall into the trap where everything is a priority now. Because if everything is a priority, nothing is actually prioritized. So let's not lose that focus. It's there within our reach, and it will help and it will improve generationally our ability to negotiate with this company on Section 28 fixes beyond this contract. So when I came here in 1999, under the current pension, I didn't expect it would never be improved. I thought along the way there would be improvements. There were decisions made by people in leadership positions, and pilots' desires maybe didn't rise to that occasion. But the decision was clear this time around that that was the pilot's focus. So that was the effort, that was the money spent on developing this portion of the negotiation. And I'll tell you here today, when I say we've had successes, this is the best retirement in the industry, bar none. No other airline, UPS, passenger carrier, is close to us on Section 28. So that's what's at risk, that's what's at stake. So when I say we have to consider and be very deliberate in our discussions with the MEC about potentially reopening or introducing issues this late in the game, it's not a zero-sum game question. There's real risk involved with it. And I'll also remind everybody in the room that every day we don't have a contract, every month that goes by, there's at least 7 to 10 more FedEx pilots that will go out the door without this retirement. So I know there may be pilots in this room that absolutely are fearful about their job security, and they want scope reopened and fixed. And they say, damn the rest of you, it can wait. That's unconscionable, because there's pilots going out the door every day under the old system. And we have to, as fiduciaries and leaders of this union, be responsible to those pilots who are literally heading out the door with the old pension. That has to be accounted for in this overall ratification. So where are we on compensation? Well, clearly, we're not there yet. Clearly, we've maintained our goals, which is industry-leading pay. Section 3, the company has been slow. They were way below UPS when they started, and they're just barely crossing over UPS pay rates today. Does anybody think that that's ratifiable here? No. Okay, neither do we, and neither does your MEC. That's why we're here, and that's why they haven't seen the proposal or in a TA format, a finalized TA format. And we keep telling the company, you guys are wrong, because the facts are clear. Our pilots will not ratify a deal with UPS pay rates in them. So here we are with the strike vote to continue to push that. And we'll continue to march down the RLA path as it's necessary to get the pay rates that the pilots will ratify. in conjunction with everything else that's been TA'd. So we're serious about the fight. It's unfortunate that FedEx has chosen this avenue rather than respect each and every pilot in this room and respect what the market condition is for pilots across this industry. So again, before we get into scope, I want to assure you that the MEC is proactively looking at this agenda item this week, and they're receiving full briefings from national and local subject matter experts. That said, we've received emails citing concern over scope in light of the company's public statements. The negotiating committee does not have the authority on our own to go and create a new priority for the pilots. The MEC must decide if there's a priority that's changed or a new priority that's entered into negotiations. That's the MEC's purview. We do not have the authority to do that. However, this does not preclude us from crafting ideas and solutions that would have an immediate impact, a positive impact on the lower half of seniority. Scope does nothing about what you're seeing in front of you. That's load factor by aircraft type going back to 2019. And there's a downward trend in every aircraft on these load factors. The load factors and the yield management, how much profit FedEx makes off an individual box, has been under significant pressure. FedEx's yield is underperforming in the Express division compared to its competitors, primarily UPS. And the yields are razor thin right now. That's average daily volumes on a quarterly basis going back to FY22. So again, do we have a scope problem or do we have a volume problem? A business problem, a customer problem? Scope doesn't fix this issue. These are percentage growth decreases from the prior slide to give you the exact percentage decrease. Those are broken out. The big ones you can see there, the total US overnight, total US package, total international export, and total package volume. Every single column is declined. Significant declines in volume. But where is it going to? Where is the bottom? FedEx is actively trying to manage this issue. They're out there proactively trying to get more business, trying to get more UPS business. And that's part of the disconnect, right? Because we're telling them, hey, we're ready to get the deal done. We're ready to take the UPS customers on. We'd love to do that. We'd love to be part of that solution. And they still can't see their way through this contract negotiation to put us in a position to accept extra customers right now. In fact, some might argue that they're putting us in a worse position to actually take on those customers. I'd agree with them. So the declines here are significant. They're trying to shore that up. But this isn't a scope problem. This is a volume problem. So what are the other challenges if we decided to reopen scope? We have somebody on the other side of the table, and I can tell you firsthand what the other side of the table will say about reopening scope. They'll never do it. That would be akin to them coming to us and saying, hey, you know what, we've had a change of mind about PBS. We want you all to go open up Section 12 and 25. We want to talk about PBS and make a full PBS play. That would be akin to them coming in and saying, hey, you like your industry best vacation that you just improved? Changed our mind. We want you to be industry average. That's what it would be like if we went back into FedEx and told them we want to tie their hands right now in an environment in which they're trying to compete with UPS. Because at the end of the day, we can go ask a few questions. How was Northwest scope on the heels of the best contract they ever signed? They were out of business, bankrupt within a year. How was US Air's scope? How was Eastern's scope? How was Braniff's scope? They were all pretty good. So there's a balancing act, right, is my point here. I'm not advocating the company's position that there's nothing we can do to address the situation or concerns. What I'm saying is there is a balance between tying the company's hands in a time that they're most focused on competing and they're concerned about the overall company survival compared to its competitors. Or are we going to make ourselves, will the FedEx senior managers be able to make FedEx Express, FedEx Corporate compete better with UPS and DHL to preserve everybody's jobs. So that's the balance. There's some fundamental differences as well when you talk about what you don't do at the bargaining table. And this is pretty straightforward. It actually, believe it or not, if you ever go to negotiating training at ALPA or any negotiating training, it doesn't have to be ALPA alone. Our handbook, it covers the Railway Labor Act and the Canada Labor Code. But here's a little statement about what you don't do in bargaining. There's only a few rules here, but one of them's, and this one's the first, you don't have regressive bargaining at the table. Why not? Well, there's a lot of good reasons why you don't do it. Namely, is you don't want your counter to have regressive bargaining. You don't want them pulling off things you've achieved. And certainly, during mediation, this is the last thing you should do. There's other options that we have aside from opening up a section that's been TA'd. We've already done that. We've already had some initial discussions with the company. Because again, don't take this as we're discarding the concerns of the crew members that have been hired here since 2015. The system bid causes a lot of concern and anxiety. It should from everybody that has been here since that point in time. But what we want to say is that we have other items we can bring to the table that won't disrupt bargaining, that won't cause the company to pull sections that they've already TA'd. We have other more immediate impact things that we can address with the company in light of this system bid. So system bid 2301, where you're closing down one FDA domicile and two pilot bases, one specific MD-11 base in Anchorage and the other LA. So there's an awful lot of senior pilots in those bases. Do you think for a minute that those senior pilots who have been on the MD-11 for the past 25 years want to come train in the 777 in Memphis? No. That's right. That's right. They don't. So does it make sense to offer an avenue to let those pilots come off the top and retire early, maybe incentivize and or remove obstacles to retirement in the discussion? Because the more pilots we can pull off the top of this mess right now that the company has created in 2301, the better off all the junior pilots will be. There are other things we can do in negotiations as well to deal directly with stalled career progression or career progression that isn't materializing in the way that you had imagined or envisioned 2 years ago or a year ago. And we've brought those issues to the table. So we have more actionable items that can be achieved quicker in a more sufficient manner to deal with the problems that a lot of the pilots have identified, clearly identified through this corporate-wide restructure that we can deal with at the table. And we're going to move those issues forward. But we all have to kind of go together on this. We have to have the MEC support to continue to fight that fight. And we have to stand together during this pretty trying time. You know, we had this slide deck for a long time. It's really been in since we started briefing pilots, and that bottom quote has been there since day one. It's never been more appropriate than, I think, this week with this briefing for the pilots. We have a lot to look forward to. We're going to get through this together. We have to get through it together. We have no choice but to be successful here. We are going to continue to fight the fight at the table. We need your support, broadly speaking. And then at these meetings and you know, in the cockpit when you're talking to pilots that may not have had the time to show up here today. The opinions matter. There's pilots significantly concerned about scope and the direction this company has chosen to take in its historic network redesign. So we're not taking that lightly. We're not ignoring it. We're taking proactive measures to deal with it the best way we can that won't harm what we've put on the table. So I've probably gone about 20 minutes longer than I should have, but thanks everybody for showing up. I appreciate it.